Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the pod, episode number 5. This week, Scott and I are going to just come to you, the two of us, and we're going to talk a bit about men and insecurities. I think it's something that's not talked about a lot. And I think we're going to try to give you guys some examples of maybe how that has impacted our lives. But to kind of kick off tonight, I'm going to have Scott give us a little bit of a preview of what's coming up ahead. And some of the special guests that might be coming on in the future.
Yeah, we've got some interesting stuff, and it's all going to be based around something Jocko and I've talked about a lot, visited on yesterday, and it comes up in all our conversations, it seems, but showing up, man, and it's today we're going to kind of go in that way too. Like, what does that mean to show up every day, and why is that important? What does it mean? And the direction we're going to go is it's going to have a lot of different context to it. Today, like Jocko said, going with insecurities and how that plays out, what it looks like in a man's life, because it's such a big thing. But then the direction we're going to go with that is, next one will be probably May 7th if we get to stay on this course of every couple of weeks. And we're going to have a neat guest, a man that's almost 80 years old, a baseball guy, going to share that. I won't talk about who that is, necessarily today, but he has agreed to join us. And this is a guy that pitched in the big leagues a little bit and scouted for 30, 40 years, spent some time in Vietnam. What else? I mean, just a man that got used to showing up every day, learning to live. And I had breakfast with him yesterday and he shared his story. And that's when I thought, man, we got to get this guy on here. So he's going to join us. And then we've got some ideas about some former players and stuff coming on to jump in on maybe some marriage stuff, husband stuff, the different roles it takes to show up every day. Showing up as an employee, showing up, so I'm really excited that we're going to kind of go that way for a while. So you got anything to add to that, Jocko, the direction we're going?
Yeah. And some future things that Scott said is we might even do, like, what does it mean, to show up as a husband? What does it mean to show up as a dad or a father? And maybe get some more guys on the pod. But yeah, as Scott mentioned, we got the chance to hang out last week, which was really fun. And, the theme that Seth, some of you guys know Seth Johnson and Scott and I were talking about is, sometimes you just have to, you have to show up, right? You might not be your best self, but just like in sports, right? Some days you don't have your best pitches and you have to show up, right? And what does that mean when you might be exhausted, tired, all those sorts of things. So we thought that'd be a good theme kind of going forward.
Yeah, and then even down the line, it might some of the casualties or different things, which we've got so many neat things that we're throwing around. Addiction, talking about, we've got two guys going to come on possibly that are players. One that's dealt with alcohol addiction, one that's dealt with a heroin addiction and an opioid type situation. And what's neat about that is it's like I don't want to say the casualties, I shouldn't have said it that way, but the guys that have been picked off in trying to cope with dealing with these roles and maybe trying to heal things from the outside, and things that went haywire on them. And so I'm excited about that. There's just nothing we're not going to touch, that I think is very important. So excited to go that direction and looking forward to today, buddy. So let's roll, man.
Yeah. So I thought maybe we'd start off with kind of just an example of what we're talking about is insecurities or the ways that we react to situations that may actually have very little to do with us. And when we were kind of prepping for the show, we were talking about this idea that one time I received an email and I took it really, really personally. And it was actually the last few weeks. And I had to really step back and ask myself, why am I responding so deeply to this email? It's not even directly accusatory. There was a comment in there about something that I had done, and it wasn't even pointed at me, but it felt deeply personal. And I noticed I went into kind of my fight, flight, or freeze. It bothered me for hours. I went back and read it again. And I realized that I was looking at this email from the lens of my own insecurities, my own desire to want approval from somebody else. And my mind is this story-making machine. And it does these all or nothing thinking, jumping to conclusion type things. And I made up this whole story that this person didn't like me, and that I had done something deeply wrong. And it really kind of comes from my history, with my parents, with, growing up, all of these ways that I've wanted approval. And when somebody says something that feels like it's critical, my fight, flight, or freeze takes off. And so Scott and I have been talking about how this kind of happens in our insecurities.
And then what that sets, and that's the point of this, right, buddy? Like, so how does that affect how you show up in the day? So, because I said this one time on one of our quotes on the page, that the day is going to show up on time. You know what I mean? And so on a day of Jocko, the day comes and you show up, you enter into it. Showing up means a lot more than just getting to work on time. That is important, it is, but it means a lot more. And so you show up and there you are, and you get this email, and boom, reactions. And it could set the whole day off on the wrong foot. And so we're basically, you haven't shown up yet. You know what I mean? You haven't showed up. You didn't show up on time because that rattled you. But it's important, like you said, that my thing is, though, isn't that amazing, Jocko? Like, talk more about that on, so what'd you do with that? And because you're reflecting back. So you're a guy that has developed the tools a little bit to be able to say, well, that touched this, and that's from this, and so that's called awareness. That's a tool. How about the guy, though, that doesn't have that? A lot of guys we're talking about, with here in this group of guys, is that they don't have that awareness, and so that sends them off into a spiral, and that could last the whole day. They might take that home. So what did you do with that? And give us some more, like, in-depth stuff there about that situation, or even something related to that like, it's real. What happened? Like, what happened next?
Yeah, and I think it really reflects when my younger self would have just rifled an email out, right? Maybe my younger self would have talked to all of my friends and got their feedback and got them on my side, and like said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person is doing this, and brought everybody else into the story. I remember once I got an email from a professor. I thought I had deeply wronged her, and I was so upset, and I had to talk to all these people, and it turned out it was just fine. The person was on vacation, but I had made up this entire story. So what I really try to do nowadays is, if I get something like that, I know I'm triggered, I know I'm in my fight, flight, or freeze. So I first try to sit for 90 seconds and just really let myself calm down. Maybe I take a couple of deep breaths. Maybe I walk around the hallway. Maybe I go to the gym for a little while, something like that, because I know where I'm at. So I think for guys, when you're feeling yourself really triggered, step one is to know you're there and see if you can do something to kind of really cope. That could be that deep breathing, the walking, even a conversation, right? Saying to somebody, I don't know if I'm right on this, but this thing is going on. Let's talk it out a little bit instead of immediately reacting. I think a lot of times I say that anger is a learned emotion. We often see reactivity based on how our parents reacted. And so we can have really quick triggers, right? When one of our wounds are hit, we respond quickly. So I think step one is just to slow things down. And in this situation, when I came back and read the email again, I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't even read the email correctly. I was triggered. And then I was able to kind of do what we call a reframe and say, let's look at this from a more balanced perspective. And I think that really helps. So that would be kind of the way that I handle it these days.
Jocko, you said fight, flight, or freeze. Go into that more. Where does that come from? Biology, the biology of it, the chemical makeup, because some guys might, because that's a real thing. That is something that was put into us for a reason. It's a very effective tool when it's kicked into high gear or needed. I mean, when it's it's because it's there for a reason. It's where does it come from? What is what is the breakdown of that?
Yeah, the way I describe it is that we are feeling animals that think. So our reptilian brain, our old brain, it's the brain that does things automatically. It's what keeps us breathing. We don't think about breathing, right? And so our body is wired when we feel threat. Back when there was, lions that could eat us, we do fight, flight, or freeze, right? Because it's what protects us. But nowadays, we don't really have a worry about an animal, but things in our lives often trigger us. And those are often come from traumatic situations when we were younger, and they're often very unconscious. So I call it like flipping your lid. And when you flip your lid, right, you go into this animalistic part of yourself. It's very hard to problem solve. And one of the biggest issues with couples, guys out there that are in relationships, is we often try to solve problems when our brain is flooded with emotions and we can't think. And so the thing that I really tell guys is we got to know when we're there, and we got to use some sort of a tool to calm ourselves down. And this is why timeouts with couples is really helpful, because it allows both partners to get their lids that are flipped back down, and they're in a more centered, calm state so they can solve a problem. So that's fight, flight, or freeze. Here's a good example. If you've ever gotten your grades, maybe you got all A's, but you got one F. What do you focus on? You focus on the F, right? Because that's a threat to you. So our brains are really wired. I call it they're skillet for the good and Velcro for the bad. So our brains have a negativity bias. So they're always looking for threats. So it's important to know when you've been triggered, and that's that insecurity, right? It's really hard to show up when you're really upset. And so getting to know that, and then the story behind it, is really important.
Does it come from, Jocko? I mean, I've been into this. I did, but I forget which system is it firing from the parasympathetic or which will go there if you, where does it come?
So the sympathetic nervous system is what goes on when you're really upset. And what we try to do is take deep breaths to get the parasympathetic nervous system on board. So that's kind of the two systems that are happening. The sympathetic is what helps you get ready to fight, and then the parasympathetic is what helps you kind of calm down. And that's why deep breathing can help turn the second one on. But yeah, I think one of the things is we often don't realize when we're in that state. And Scott, let me ask you, how do you know when you're triggered? Like what goes on?
Well, for me, I'm trying to think of a real recent example. And because it happens a lot to me. Less and less, I'm more aware now when it happens, but I notice it. Like so the question is, how do I know when I'm triggered? Here's an example, man. I was with a meeting with a group of guys on, it doesn't matter what day, it was very recent. And it was just a gathering. There's probably 6 guys, all different ages, and it's really cool. We meet and they discuss issues. Someone will have a question, they bring up the question, and then we go into it. And so I sat and listened to everybody. I like to more and more sometimes not even speak there. I learned so much. There's a guy that's 80, there's a guy that's 60, there's a couple dudes in their 30s, so there's such a neat range of guys. And one guy asked how I thought about it, about what we were talking about. So I had some input that I want, an opinion. So I shared it. And while I was sharing it, you're usually making eye contact with a guy and whatever. Well, imagine this. Imagine I looked away right now and you were with another guy and I looked over and you were looking at him. And right away, I'd be wondering, well, these guys aren't really interested in what I'm saying. And And then right away, the insecurity part, and this happened, I looked up and the one guy was looking at another guy. And right away, I finished what I was saying. The night ended well, but when I went outside and the night was over, I could not stop thinking about, were they making fun of me?
Hmm.
Were they, this is what went on. Were they not interested in what I'm saying? Do I talk too much? It all started going. And I started making these stories up, and it brought up then, it brought up kind of a fearful side of me. I could feel that. And then another side of me was, like wanting to defend.
Hmm.
And everything I've had like that in my life, it goes like that. It's like exactly in that pattern. So there's a young, fearful part of me that's wondering what's going on, and then there's a part of me that wants to defend the young, fearful one, even part of me, and that's all off of a glance. So there was a threat. There was a threat there that I perceived,
Hmm.
and how I dealt with it. I went outside and I had a long walk from there to where I was headed, to get home, and I started having to go through that. No, that's not true.
Hmm.
I don't know what the glance was for.
Hmm.
It doesn't really matter what it was for. And it probably wasn't anything. The guy might have just looked over for whatever reason. But I read into that, and I've done that my whole life. And it brings me anxiety um, that can even go down into some depression. That little wee thing can set me off. And it can be something that can linger for a while. I mean, you and I talked when we were visiting last about this, that a reaction, if not dealt with, that lingers. If it stays for a couple hours, it becomes a mood.
Hmm.
Mood that lingers for a couple days. Um, what did I say? It becomes. You and I talked about it. A mood
Yeah, it
becomes.
becomes part of your personality.
Yeah. So, and it's like, so it's almost like if you don't check this stuff, um, things can spiral out of control off of one little thing. And I think all of us deal with that for sure.
Yeah, it becomes like a personality or a temperament, right? Like,
That's the word I was looking for. A mood, if it's not dealt with after a period of time, becomes a temperament. A temperament left alone can become a personality trait.
hmm.
And I'm talking about now something left alone for months. So it does matter that you deal with it, because all of a sudden now you look at, and you know more about this than I would, but now you're getting into a neurosis, possibly, and uh, a health issue too, because the thing that I was thinking about when you talked about the prehistoric type man, why this system, not prehistoric necessarily, but the man way back, why this system was put in place. It's a great system. I mean, you've got, let's back up for what it was meant for. Saber-toothed tiger, you're camping out, and there's a, we can even put it up to this. There's a threat of a mountain lion. You're out camping in Colorado, and there's been a mountain lion sighting outside of your tent. And this is how powerful this system is. And if you are not feeling good, say you've got a little bit of the flu right now, and you haven't been feeling good, this system is so powerful that it knows that if that lion that's out there, um, the system is going to shut down anything that was going towards healing of that flu or whatever you had. It's going to call on all the reserves, all the energy, and put it to where you can either fight or flee. And it knows to do that, and you will have the energy to fight that out. And you could feel horrible, but it does it at the expense of the health.
Hmm.
I mean, so it's like it knows how to prioritize. Well, where things get goofy today is, what if there's no real threat outside of the tent? So your body doesn't know that. So here I am. The actual threat outside is not a mountain lion, it's Jocko's email. It really upset him to that degree. And all of a sudden now, at the expense of his health. And so I know that's a whole different way to go with this, but they're linking a lot of health stuff to how we deal with our insecurities and how it changes our system. And some people, they're thinking and feeling themselves into some tough situations health wise too. So this
Yeah.
stuff is huge.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you bring up a really good point, like that glance, and I love the way that you talked about that. Again, we talk about the idea that often the way we think affects the way we feel and the way we behave, right? And so if our story making machine is saying that glance is a threat, then it really triggers all those emotions and then really impacts our behavior. And that can become an ingrained cycle that's really not healthy, right? Like I can't trust anyone. And I think the other thing is that guy could have just farted, right? Like he could be looking down because the dude just ripped ass. And you thought it was that he didn't care about what you were saying, but he deeply cared about what you said. It just happened that he was, he just farted and he was laughing, or who knows, right? We just
No,
don't know. But these great story making machines, and if we think about it, like how often does that happen with our wives or significant others and our kids, right? These story making machines, they may be looking for connection and we just miss that. And I'm going to tell another story, and this is kind of vulnerable, but this happened between me and Scott last week. Just to give you a great example of this. I was messing with the YouTube channel. A good buddy of mine, Mark Weber, had said, "Hey, Justin, the best way to get these videos out are to, put names on them." And I messed up one of them. And Scott is texting me just for a moment to connect on something, but I thought he was texting me to be critical about changing the title of one of our videos, which he didn't even fucking care about. But I came up with this whole story in my head about how he was mad at me. Where did that come from? But now I'm feeling like he's mad at me. I'm trying to fix something. I'm feeling anxious and stressed, and it's all in my brain. It's not even real. So that really kind of talks about how powerful our brains are in making up these stories.
And that affects you. So we're saying like you show up in a day, that affects you, man. So that affects, like, that could have affected our relationship if left, like, because you can go and say, man, then gosh, if you're going to be that critical, these are the thoughts, right? So I'm speaking a thought, but man, if he's going to be that critical, do it yourself, man. You know what I mean? And so all of a sudden now it's turned into something that spirals out of control, and it doesn't have to. How about this, Jocko? What an awesome doorway, though, these things are. If you can become aware to deal with this stuff and to start to grow. And that's kind of where I wanted to go to with this. Like, these are, if you switch it and look at it as an opportunity. I had something happen to me this week, and it brought up, and I was amazed by this, but and then I thought, man, it's always been like this. That's what's cool when you can get to this. So the first step is just become aware of it, right? Become aware that that's what's happening. There's an emotion. Someone said, it's always what someone said. Or a glance, but it's usually what someone said and through an email, text, which is dangerous because email and text, and mainly text a lot because we're doing that more. This texting can be dangerous because it takes out the emotional, like you don't know, you don't see them. It's like the one you said. So right away, and I knew it though, buddy, and I'm glad I checked on it. The way I looked at it, I thought, oh, Jocko thinks I'm being critical of what he did, and I am not even 100% sure what he did. I mean, so I hadn't even looked at that, but I did sense it. And I'm glad I have that to where, but see, here's the double-edged sword. I'm glad I have that to where if I feel that I've slighted somebody, I'm going to ask them and say, hey, man, I said this and I didn't even consider what kind of day you were having, where you were, how busy you were. I didn't consider any of that. And so I'd like to know, hey, did I offend you by saying that? And if I didn't, I apologize. The double-edged sword part of that is that we come so, I mean, I worry a lot about what people think of me. And I worry about if I hurt your feelings, and I think I worry too much about that, and so it can go both ways where, I had an incident with Carrie yesterday. So this is more on a husband thing. I had a busy day. So this is talking about showing up. I had a day off, so it had nothing to do with work. It had to do with getting some things done and taking care of some stuff. And I got a wife in that equation. I wanted to talk to you because our time when you and I usually talk kind of got moved just because of schedules. So that's life, you know. And I've learned this, a lot of guys struggle as soon as the week gets upset and their agenda is
Mm,
upset. It affects everything on the showing up aspect, it seems. And so I've learned though to prioritize, do some different things, but always knowing that, hey man, I don't get rattled as much anymore. I'm still got a long ways to go, but here's the example from yesterday. I did a few things, and I always say, hey, make a plan, but hold the plan loosely and allow it to shape and form. And I think that's part of accepting what the day has to offer as you show up for the day.
mm,
And so, and I'm sharing things, and it's funny because I want to be honest. I struggle here still, but I'm catching myself more and more, and it matters. So a quick one is that you and I were going to talk at 5 o'clock. Well, and now I'm trying to balance that in because you have a day. So you and I were very flexible, and we do that really well. Is that we said, well, let's just see how it works, but this is what we'll shoot for, and then we'll work from there. And then I get a text from Carrie. Our German Shepherd has to go into the vet, not an emergency per se, but she needed to go in. Well, Carrie needs help with the Shepherd because I mean, the dog is strong, you know what I mean? And so
mm,
she wants to know if someone can help her. And I thought, man, the thing's at 5 o'clock and me and you are at 5.
mm,
Right away, part of me wanted to react and say, well, that's not going to work.
mm,
Uh, I got something at 5.
mm,
So then I said to her, you know what? I text back and said, hey, it'll be taken care of. We'll figure it out. I'll get back to you. It allowed me to reach back to you and say, hey, dude, is there any flexibility here? I got something coming up. And you were like, yeah, absolutely. It allowed you to go and flex your stuff a little bit. And the part of the story I want to get to is that so Carrie and I got to walk down there, spend some time together.
mm.
So it was awesome that way. Walk home, uh, got to visit with you, which was a great visit. It could have been probably our best podcast just because of the conversation we had. And then Carrie and I were looking forward to watching a movie together. Um, she made some dinner, not, but she knew it was just it wasn't a sit down dinner. She was going to make some dinner. We're going to watch a movie together. And then it didn't happen on the time she thought. And so she was a little, I don't know, feelings hurt or whatever, that we didn't spend time together. But I mean, I thought I made the time. I thought I made it at 8 o'clock that we were fine. Well, she was kind of tired. And it was just kind of ironic that the things I pushed back to make time for my wife to go to the vet. Uh, and so I had to deal with, okay, so did I do anything wrong? And this was where it was, I didn't, but I wasn't, I thought, let my wife have some time to sort through this on her own. She's going to see that I was just trying to balance things but before I might have thought, you know what, that's bullshit that she acts like that
Mm.
and would want to get confrontive and then put it in her face that, hey man, I went out of my way to change some things in my life to fit your life. And so see what I'm talking, you talk about the storytelling machine. I didn't even allow it to go there. I knew that I did ask myself, hey, I'll tell her that, hey, I did want to spend time with you. I thought we were good. And you know what? Once she had a time to look at it, she realized that there was nothing wrong on her end either.
Mm.
That could have turned into a situation. And let me tell you, we won't, husband and wife thing will be later. Those things can linger for 2 weeks in
Yes.
a marriage and then a month. And then you wonder why the hell, you know what I mean? All over that simple stuff when nobody did anything wrong. You know what I mean?
That's right.
People,
And I think you're really highlighting that you made sure that you didn't make assumptions and you didn't jump to conclusions. You left some space. And I think that is an amazing technique in a relationship.
It is, and you said that assumption thing is, I assume them dudes didn't respect me down at that meeting.
Mm,
I assume that, you know what I mean, and then it goes back to, you know what I mean. I struggle with that issue of respect, and someone, are they making fun of me, man? And I'm not 100% sure where all that goes back to. Maybe I'll never find out. Maybe I don't need to, but
mm,
I do feel that. And then makes it worse. That other side of me feels the need to come in and defend,
yes.
and that's got me in a lot of trouble. Several times in sports, in life, where I'm like, I'll show this prick, you know what I mean? I'll get this prick back, and total misread, bloodshed, you know what I mean? And now no going back from that.
And the crazy thing is, like, both of all these examples we've given tonight are really, it's our issue that's projected, right? It's our story making machine. And then conflict occurs when there's probably nothing there, right? Again, there's this bias in our brains that think that other people are thinking about us way more than they are. People really don't give a shit. But we think that they're doing something to us when it's often our own issue projected, right? And so I think what we're saying about showing up is daily being reflective on your own stuff and seeing how it plays out when you're projecting your own stuff, right? And I think what you said to me on our call that was really salient is that, yeah, so how do you measure success here is when you're able to get back in the game quicker, which is your professional life or your wife or your kids, right? When it lasts 20 minutes, an hour, maybe a couple hours instead of 2 days, right? That means that you're starting to work through it. You're challenging negative assumptions. You realize when your stuff is coming in, and the faster that you're able to kind of get back and show up, right? That's what we're looking for, right? We're not making assumptions. We're not jumping to conclusions. We're realizing when our shit is getting in the way, and we're able to re-engage with the day. We're able to re-engage with life, I think, is what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And then, like I was thinking about with guys, how okay, so what does this look like? So what does not showing up look like when we think we're showing up? And we've talked about the present moment. We've talked about awareness, and these things we're talking about can only happen that way, being aware and being in the present moment and being able to find that space, like you said, to check this.
Mm.
And here's what's neat: you don't have a lot of time. And so guys are all excited. They think, okay, I'll do that better. And then how this stuff springs up and your opportunities are when shit's in your face.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like someone does something or says something and it's in your face. So you've got seconds so I thought, the best thing is see if you can get to 5 seconds, man, without reacting.
Yes.
And then maybe you can get to 10 seconds. And someone might say, oh, whatever, that's not going to make a difference. Oh, no, it is. How about what you said? You said this. How about I don't send the email? How about I just write it, leave it? Now you got to be careful there because a dumbass like me accidentally hits the send. You know what I mean? So, but I write it and then I leave it. I go work out. I go have something to eat. I go exercise. I come back and then I think, okay. And one thing that helped me back coaching, and I didn't realize a friend, an acquaintance, a guy I used to coach with, shared this with me, but you'll watch in athletics and coaching and it actually it makes me laugh because all it does is kill the grass. But you sent me that picture of that field you were at. You were pissed off because they were putting diamond dry on the grass. And I did, you said, this is insane, right? And I said, yes, it is, man. I mean, and the reason that spot's probably there, Jocko, is because watch a baseball game, and I just don't know what they're trying to do there, but you'll hear a guy right away said, everyone down the line. And I'm like, what the hell happens down the line? There must be like a wisdom spot there. You know what I mean? And all you do is kill the grass, and all you do is say a bunch of dumb things that you shouldn't have said. And so I stopped doing that. I stopped it. And number one, it saved the grass in that area because they stand in the same spot. They go down past third base and they camp there. And then you see the coach's head moving like a chicken, and he's saying a bunch of dumbass things, man.
Yes.
And then you look, and majority of the guys that are on the perimeter aren't even listening. They've tuned this guy out a long time ago. You know what I mean? And so they're not even listening. It's just a total waste of time. And so then I decided, a friend of mine had mentioned this, but I had been doing it a little bit on my own, but I didn't realize that I'm going to stick to this. I struggled way too much with losing, and it's not. I'm not proud of that. I mean, people say, "Oh, he's a winner," and no, man, I had and still do probably have some issues, and it's not healthy. So what I started doing is I said, "All right, when we win or lose, we're out of here. If you're on the road, we're gone. If we win, if you're supposed to shake hands, you do that. Then you go get your jobs, and we bolt. We're out of there." And if it's on the road, what I did is I'm going to drive the bus, and the bus became therapeutic to where, oh, if you could have looked inside my soul, buddy, it was inside it was just turmoil. The waters were stirred, man. The thoughts were flying in. These players don't care. I mean, I gotta, and it would just be like if someone saw what was going on in my thinking, I would have had to go into a psychologist, and that's most coaches, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But once I drove for a few miles, then I realized I started kind of chilling. And then and what's amazing is the shit I was making up in my mind. I thought, damn, that's not even true, man. These guys care. You know what I mean? They're 18 and 19 years old, man. And it started to change things. So put that in a business situation, put that in a family situation. What can you do to create, as you said, that space to
Yes.
protect everybody? It protects you and it protects everybody. In that I don't go and react to something when I don't even have the facts. I don't know what's true. I don't know. And so, I mean, those are the strategies you got to use, and they come up in marriages. Like, this morning my wife got up and I wanted to tell her a bunch of things, but I could tell that she came and sat beside me, which is a good thing. I went and made her a coffee. I'm going to sound like a great husband. I don't always do this, and I need to do it more. But I went and got her a coffee, but I kept thinking of all the things I wanted to say. And then I felt something in me say, dude, don't say anything, man. Just shut up. It looks like she just wants to chill. And so I didn't say anything, but I had to tell myself. I was like the monkey in the tree visiting brother Jocko and wanting to just start firing things. And you and I have a good time with that. But man, read the room, they say, you know what I mean? Well, read the relationship, read the situation, and be careful. Don't read into it because you might not have all the facts.
Yeah. And we do need to wrap up, and thank you for that, Scott. I think that's really good wisdom. And I think what you're saying is, I think there's like an inside of us, if we can quiet our monkey minds, there's some wisdom, and that wisdom will show up if we can get our minds to just shut the fuck up sometimes, right? And I think the other thing I heard from what you were saying to kind of summarize our episode is that we got to keep working on this stuff, right? We all have insecurities, we all have traumas from our past, and we have to keep working at figuring these things out and being better at calming ourselves, reframing, and looking at them more objectively so that we can show up every day.
Good stuff, buddy. And you know what? Remember, there's two emotions, two governing emotions, man, fear and love. And the one we're talking about when I'm looking around, and we'll go there more another time, but when there's fear in a man, things are going to be askew. I mean, it's got to go through that filter. And when a man starts to heal and love becomes the dominating or the government per se, or the governing emotion, that's how it happens day by day. Awareness, present moment, things change.
Awesome. All right, Skip, we're going to wrap it up, and we'll see you guys next time. If you liked our pod today, please like us, forward it to a friend, follow us. We want to make sure that we are getting our material out to as many guys as possible. Have a great week. We'll talk to you soon.